Welcome to Psychological Explorations with Dr. Michael Axelman and Daniela. We're glad to be back presenting once again after some time away. Today we focus on Winnicott's 1958 paper, The Capacity to Be Alone, which you can find in the compilation, The Maturational Processes and the Facilitating Environment. Bridging psychoanalysis and developmental theory. The infant caretaker relationship forms the basis for understanding emotional resilience, autonomy, and the capacity to be alone, which we will focus on today. Being is a developmental achievement. Without the capacity to be, defenses take over in the place of what could have been a secure attachment. In almost all our psychoanalytic treatments, there comes a time when the ability to be alone is important to the patient. Clinically, this may be represented by a silent phase or a silent session, and this silence, far from being evidence of resistance, turns out to be an achievement on the part of the patient. A peaceful self-connection is associated with the psychological strength to tolerate and thrive in solitude. The capacity to be alone as a developmental achievement, rooted in love and care, expressed through reliability. It will be appreciated that actually to be alone is not what I am discussing. A person may be in solitary confinement and yet not able to be alone. How greatly he must suffer is beyond imagination. However, many people do become able to enjoy solitude before they are out of childhood, and they may even value solitude as a most precious possession. Alone in the presence of the caretaker. The main point of this contribution can now be stated. Although many types of experience go into the establishment of the capacity to be alone, there is one that is basic, and without a sufficiency of it, the capacity to be alone does not come about. This experience is that of being alone as an infant and a small child in the presence of the mother. Thus, the basis of the capacity to be alone is a paradox. It is the experience of being alone while someone else is present. Here is implied a rather special type of relationship, that between the infant or small child who is alone and the mother or mother substitute who is in fact reliably present, even if represented for the moment by the cot or the pram, that's the baby's carriage or stroller, or the general atmosphere of the immediate environment. Infants play alone in the presence of the mother. Being able to enjoy being alone with another person who is also alone is in itself an experience of health. That is relatively free from the property that we call withdrawal. The capacity to be alone is so nearly synonymous with emotional maturity. Being alone in the presence of someone can take place at a very early stage, when the ego immaturity is naturally balanced by the ego support from the mother. In the course of time, the individual introjects the ego supportive mother, and in this way becomes able to be alone without frequent reference to the mother or the mother symbol. And this is what's referred to in object relations theory as the good internal object. Maturity and the capacity to be alone implies that the individual has had the chance through good enough mothering to build up a belief in a benign environment. This belief is built up through a repetition of satisfactory instinctual gratifications, and considerable degree of ego maturity is being assumed. The integration of the individual into a unit is assumed. Otherwise, there would be no sense in making reference to the inside or the outside, or in giving special significance to the fantasy of the inside. In negative terms, there must be relative freedom from persecutory anxiety. In positive terms, the good internal objects are in the individual's personal inner world and are available for projection at a suitable moment. I am alone. Internalization of the caretaker supports the development of creativity, self-reflection, and identity formation. First, there is the word I, implying much emotional growth. The individual is established as a unit, integration is a fact. At this point, no reference is being made to living. Next come the words I am, representing a stage in the individual growth. By these words, the individual not only has shape, but also life. In the beginnings of I am, the individual is, so to speak, raw, is undefended, vulnerable, potentially paranoid. The individual can only achieve the I am stage because there exists an environment which is protective. The protective environment is, in fact, the mother preoccupied with her own infant and oriented to the infant's ego requirements through her identification with her own infant. Next, I come to the words, I am alone. This further stage does indeed involve an appreciation on the part of the infant of the mother's continued existence. I consider, however, that I am alone is a development from I am, dependent on the infant's awareness of the continued existence of a reliable mother whose reliability makes it possible for the infant to be alone and to enjoy being alone for a limited period. In this way, I am trying to justify the paradox that the capacity to be alone is based on the experience of being alone in the presence of someone, and that without a sufficiency of this experience, the capacity to be alone cannot develop. In closing, we'll briefly apply some of this theory to therapy. It is only when a person is alone that he can discover his true self. By encouraging the capacity to be alone in therapy, clients learn to tolerate the anxiety associated with introspection and separation. The focus is placed on the non-intrusive relational style, which is an essential feature. So the intrusive parenting, the intrusive therapy born of anxiety on the part of the caretaker or the therapist, has to be brought into self-awareness. It serves as a key to developing authenticity and self-reliance. And the capacity to be alone represents the foundation of self. Solitude is a strength nurtured through care. The individual who has developed the capacity to be alone is constantly able to rediscover the personal impulse. And the personal impulse is not wasted because the state of being alone is something which, though paradoxically, always implies that someone else is there. We can look at boredom both in home life and in the treatment room as a child struggling with this capacity. Sometimes it's expressed as overactivity, overly verbal, child who talks a lot, talks too much, talks excessively, A child who's intrusive, maybe with touch or with getting too close. Perhaps these are all symptoms of a child struggling with developing the capacity to be alone. And of course, the overuse of screens as a distraction from this anxiety. Thank you for joining us once again today. It's great to resume our presentations after our hiatus. We look forward to catching up with you again soon.